Hi everyone, welcome back to Bookish Plants. My name is Odalis. I am here with another video finally after many months of not uploading anything here. I am going to talk to you about some of my favorite books that I've read this year. It's been quite an interesting year of reading. I did not read as many books as I thought I would. I definitely read more last year. For obvious reasons, I think, and also just, I don't know, I had really long reading slumps this year. So yeah, there were some months where I wasn't really reading much at all, or barely a book. So, you know, we're trying to get back on track. I don't know how well it's gonna go, but hopefully it'll work out soon enough. That doesn't mean I didn't read some fantastic books. I actually read a handful of favorites this year, so I will definitely be going through those. I know I haven't been posting a lot on my YouTube channel. I just haven't had the time or the energy to really film anything, but I'm kind of getting more ideas now, and so hopefully I'm gonna try to ride that along as much as I can in order to make more stuff. But otherwise, yeah, this is gonna be my list of my favorites for this year. Again, if you would like to subscribe, feel free to subscribe. You can like this video, or you can also follow me on Instagram at bookishplants. I will have that linked in the description and somewhere around here as well, so there are many other ways to find me, essentially. Okay, so the first book that I would like to go through, it's actually my first book that I finished this year, and that is This Is How You Lose the Time Worm by Amal El-Mohtar and Max Gladstone. So this book, and I had a more in-depth review of it in one of my other videos, so definitely if you want a more in-depth review. I don't really feel like talking about too much about this book because I feel like I've mentioned this everywhere, and I recently posted about it on my Instagram as well, so definitely if you want to see my other thoughts on it, by all means go ahead and look at that. But this is definitely one of my favorite books for this year. It was very interesting when I first read it, because I was very confused as to what was going on. I didn't know exactly where the book was going, or rather I didn't know, just the way it was written kind of seemed a little bit confusing to me. But as I started reading more and more, I started to actually like it a lot. And it's one of those books that I just kept thinking about even after I was done reading it. And the only reason why I can think of I was doing that was because I just really wasn't sure if I really loved it or I really hated it. And I think when a book leaves me with that kind of confusing feeling, I can't help but just feel more and more intrigued by it. And eventually I kind of settled on, I really love this book. It's a fairly short read, and basically you have two time-traveling agents who are fighting for their respective sides. One side is more of an all-organic, natural environment, and then the other one being more of a technological-based society, and all the beings within that society are all kind of interconnected in this central motherboard. And essentially the task of these two agents is for them to kind of taunt one another and try to get information from the other person in the hopes of trying to get vital information that would allow their respective sides to win. And so basically this whole war takes place throughout the span of time and throughout the span of, you know, space and everything. And so they travel to different places, they travel through different time periods. And they leave letters for one another for the other person to find. And in these letters, again, the main purpose is to taunt one another, to kind of get the other person to talk and to give up information. But as they start to kind of share more and more of their letters, they start to share more and more about themselves, and they actually happen to kind of fall in love with each other. And it's very interesting, and I just really love the concept of time travel in general. Like, it's just one of my favorite concepts to ever explore, and it's definitely interesting. And I just find it very funny that two fighting sides and their most top-ranking agents are like kind of falling in love with each other, and they develop like this really nice friendship. So yeah, that's definitely one of my favorite books for this year. Again, next book I have on my list is Gods of Jade and Shadow by Silvia Moreno Garcia. And this book follows our main character, Cassiopeia, who lives in Mexico. She lives with her family, though her family doesn't, well, she lives with her cousins, and her aunts and uncles, they don't really consider her a part of the family because of her indigenous background. So she has her mother, who is a part of this family, and then her father, who unfortunately died, but he was of indigenous descent. And because of that indigenous descent, her mother's side of the family doesn't really consider her family, and so she kind of lives with them, but she also works for them, essentially. And so one day she was cleaning out her grandfather's room, and she accidentally knocks over a chest, and this chest just so happened to contain the Mayan death god, and essentially because she knocked it over, she ended up freeing him from this chest, and he kind of enlists Cassiopeia's help in gathering items and gathering body parts that he's missing in order for him to return back to the underworld where his kingdom resides. And so essentially this book is it takes place in the jazz era in Mexico City, and it is such an interesting book. I think I really loved it first of all, for its setting. As a Mexican, I felt very proud reading this book, and I just love the fact that there was another author out there that was like kind of writing these stories, as like an homage to the Mexican, to Mexico City and all that stuff, and kind of, paying tribute to, the Mexican heritage, which I really enjoyed. The book in particular was really funny. I think there is a scavenger hunt element to it, because obviously they're going through different cities, different villages in order to find the missing body parts. But also there's this interesting dynamic between Cassiopeia and the death god, because he's kind of like, they're both like bickering like an old married couple, but they also are completely oblivious to the fact that everybody sees that they should be together, and then they're not, and they don't see it. And you don't know if it's because they're playing it off because they don't want to, or they don't want to admit it, or they're really just not interested in one another. I just found it really funny, and it was really good. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the pacing of it. I enjoyed the ending as well. In the more magical realism genre, or you want something like a fantasy setting in a fantasy book set in like a different country than you're accustomed to, then I would highly recommend it. And yeah, I definitely enjoyed it. So that was definitely one of my favorites. Next up on my favorites is Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler, and this book was quite the ride. So first of all, this book gave me massive Walking Dead vibes, solely because of its post-apocalyptic nature of it. It is set in the United States after various natural disasters have occurred, and basically this book follows our main character, who grows up in this gated community, and she grows up with her family, and unfortunately her gated community ends up being trespassed, and people who were being kept out are now coming in, and they start to ransack all the houses, they start to burn down everything, they start to demolish everything. So in this book in particular, it's very like I said, it's post-apocalyptic vibes. That's why I said it reminded me of The Walking Dead so much, though there are no zombies, not explicitly anyways, but there is like this need to survive. And my only disclaimer about it, and I guess I don't really wouldn't really recommend it for everybody, especially if you're one of those people that's already paying attention to the news a lot, especially during this time, and you're kind of scared of what's going on. This book might not really be for you. However, I know some people find some kind of comfort in finding perspective in what's going on. The book in particular is frighteningly like prophetic in a way. It was written in the 1990s, but a lot of the things that are happening in this book are somewhat exaggerated versions of what's happening today, and unfortunately like it just gives like such a bleak picture. What I did appreciate a lot about this book is its perspective, and it's kind of, though things are really bad, there's still some good, or there's at least something that you can potentially do to help mitigate everything that's going on, even if you can't fully stop it. And I think that's what this book does, especially with, you know, empathy, because empathy is so scarce in this book, and it's actually seen as a disease. I think the main point of it is that with a little bit, with just a little bit of empathy, you may be able to, you know, mitigate what's going on, and at the very least help each other. And I think that's what's important. These next two books are Mrborn and The Well of Ascension by Brandon Sanderson, and these are books 1 and 2 of the Mrborn series, or the Mrborn trilogy. We are first introduced to the main character Kelsier, who is actually a member of the Ska population, and in this world the Ska are kind of considered as like low class. They're like the marginalized group of the society. He decides that he wants to overcome or overthrow the Lord Ruler, who is the person that kind of dictated who would get like the short end of the stick, who would become slaves, who wouldn't be. And so in this world, we also have something called allomancers. And what allomancers do is they can consume like pieces of metal, and depending on the metal that they consume, they can manipulate a certain skill, or they can enhance a certain skill. And so we also have another population known as Mrborn, who can consume all kinds of metals and use all kinds of skills. Kelsier realizes that he is actually a Mrborn after he was trying to escape from like his punishment. He was kind of thrown into like a cave, and his task was basically to just try and get out. And if he would get out, then like, you know, he would be pretty powerful, because most people are sent there to die. But he didn't. He is freed, but he has this idea to overthrow the Lord Ruler, and by doing that, he gathers a group of allomancers who are highly skilled in their specific, or in their respective metals, and he kind of gathers them in order to create like this sort of rebellion, this revolution sorts. And so alongside, and within that group, we also find Vin, somebody who works for like these bandits, and she does it in order to survive pretty much. She doesn't really want to steal, she doesn't want to like do all these things, but she has to in order to have a place to eat and sleep. Also find out that she is a Mrborn as well. Such a good book. It's such a good series. I have not finished it, and I kick myself every day for not finishing it, and the only reason that I can think of is, again, I'm trying to get back into out of this reading slump, and I feel like going back into this world might be a little much, but hopefully in the next year, hopefully I can go through with like a full in-depth review of the whole series. So hopefully, fingers crossed, I get to do that. But if not, then, you know, whatever. Next up, I have Educated by Tara Westover, and this is actually a memoir book. Tara recounts her life growing up with parents who are very much obsessed with the apocalypse. They are obsessed with like preparing for like the end of days. They are for preparing for their savior, for all that stuff. And essentially, she recounts her childhood and her growing up without going to school, without going to the hospital, without going to the doctors, without doing any of these things that are probably would be considered like, you know, normal stuff for any kid. A triggering book, I think, if you're particularly triggered by like abuse, by trauma, by all that kind of stuff. So if you are triggered by that, I probably wouldn't recommend this one. But if you don't mind it, or if it's not as triggering for you, it is very, very powerful in how she comes to know, or how she ends up educating herself, and how little by little she starts to transition from being somebody who's completely oblivious, doesn't know anything, to becoming a well-versed, well-educated woman. And I think seeing that transition and seeing how the writing kind of reflects that was a treat, and it was kind of, it was really interesting to see. I particularly read this book as an audiobook, and I thought the narration was also well done. I really enjoyed it, and I think it's a really interesting read for anybody who's interested in like parents with mental health, growing up with parents with mental health, or you know, just other kinds of people that, you know, live in the US and stuff. So yeah. Really, my last book for this list is, at the time of recording this, I haven't quite finished it just yet, but I just know it's already one of my favorites of this year, and that is The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. And this book in particular is a collection of essays that he wrote, where he's kind of taking like our normal ranking system or our normal rating system that we use for books, for movies, all that stuff, and he's rating different things in the world, and which is, I find kind of funny. He really goes in depth as to like what that particular thing reminds him of, or what that particular thing like symbolizes for him, and yeah, it's just really interesting. Like, I remember one particular rating or one particular essay where he was talking about scratch and sniff stickers, and how those stickers are like very gimmicky, and like he goes on about how they're made. And essentially he's like, well, I give these a high rating because when I was in school, I was being bullied and I was being picked on. So when I would go back home, I would actually get my book of, you know, scratch and sniff stickers. I would scratch them and I would smell them, and it would bring me peace. It would bring me it would make me feel better. And I just feel like that's like such a small thing that like people probably wouldn't really think twice about, but to certain people, like, small things really make a difference in their lives, or they symbolize different things. So I'm really enjoying it. I'm listening it to as an audiobook, and it's such a great audiobook because he is the one that narrates it himself, and it honestly listens like you read it like a podcast, almost, because it's like a conversation that he's just having with you, and he's just telling you about like, this is what this reminds me of, this is what this reminds me of. And yeah, I just think it's really interesting. So, and it's also a really good book if you're like not such a huge reader, and you kind of just you don't really want to read a book that's like you can go through and through. So you can just like read like little essays here and there, and eventually you'll like finish the book whenever you want to. So that's pretty much it. That's all I have for today. Again, I won't say that I am going to film more videos. I definitely want to, but in the case that I don't want to put that. I don't want to put that expectation on me that like I'm failing or anything like that. So I'm just gonna be like, I'll see you in the next one. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Those are my favorite books of this year. Again, I didn't quite read as much as I thought I would this year, but you know, reading slumps, they attack you whenever they want, and there's really not much you can do about it other than try to ride along and just read whenever you feel like it, you know? So otherwise, if you would like to give this video a like or subscribe to my channel, that's totally fine. That's totally cool with you. I have some more ideas for videos, so hopefully I can get to actually filming and editing and stuff, because I kind of feel a little bit more inspirational these few days. So hopefully I can do them. Otherwise, you can definitely follow me on my Instagram. I am a lot more active on there, and you can definitely look me up on there. Follow me on Instagram. I am at Bookish Plants, and yeah, you can interact with my posts there, or you can interact with me here in the comments. Let me know what's your favorite book of this year, or in my Instagram post, whatever it is, whatever you want. Okay, so that's pretty much it. That's all I have. Thank you for watching this, if you watch this, and yeah, bye.